The emergency beacon screamed across the void, its desperate signal cutting through the cosmic silence like a knife. On Earth, the massive radio telescopes of the Deep Space Monitoring Station picked up the transmission at exactly 14:37 GMT on a Tuesday that would change everything. Dr. Sarah Chen was finishing her coffee when the computers started going crazy. Alert sounds filled the control room as data streams flooded the screens. The signal was unlike anything they had ever received, not random cosmic noise, but a structured, intelligent transmission using mathematical patterns that could only mean one thing. "Someone out there is asking for help," she whispered. The signal came from the Kepler 442 system, nearly 1,200 light-years away. According to the transmission, an entire civilization was under attack. The message was simple, but terrifying. "We are the Zelani people. Our worlds burn. Children dying. Please, anyone who receives this, we beg for help." They call themselves the Horde, and they consume everything. Within 6 hours, the message had reached every government on Earth. Within 12 hours, emergency sessions were being held in every major capital. Within 24 hours, humanity made a decision that shocked even themselves. They were going to respond. Most of Earth's population didn't know the truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. The governments had kept it quiet for nearly 50 years. In 2029, first contact had happened not with a friendly alien visitor, but with a terrified refugee ship that crash-landed in the Australian outback. The aliens inside were barely alive, their ship damaged beyond repair. They called themselves the Keth, and they brought terrible news. The galaxy was not the peaceful place humans had hoped it would be. It was a brutal hunting ground dominated by predator species, where entire civilizations disappeared overnight. When the Keth learned where they had landed, they nearly died of shock all over again. Earth was classified as a Class 1-2 death world, one of the most dangerous planets in known space. The gravity was crushing by galactic standards. The atmosphere was toxic to most species. The weather could kill even protected beings. And worst of all, it was home to humans. Humans, the Keth explained in shaking voices, were legendary throughout the galaxy. Not as explorers or scientists or diplomats, but as the most feared warriors in known space. Stories of human soldiers were told to frighten children on 1,000 worlds. Their ships were avoided by pirates and raiders. Their planets were marked as "Approach Forbidden" on every star chart. The Keth had crashed on a death world inhabited by Deathworlders, and they were certain they were going to die. Instead, the humans had saved them. Dr. Martinez, the xenobiologist who first made contact, had treated their injuries and fed them carefully prepared food. The military had protected them from curious crowds. The governments had provided them with materials to repair their ship. When the Keth finally left Earth 6 months later, they carried with them a small data package, humanity's first official message to the galaxy. It had been simple. "We are here. We are peaceful. But we will protect those who cannot protect themselves." The galaxy had not known what to make of this message. Humans were supposed to be savage monsters, not protectors. The few species brave enough to make contact had been stunned by what they found. Yes, humans were incredibly dangerous. Their reflexes were impossibly fast. Their strength was overwhelming. Their capacity for violence was terrifying, but they used all of that power to help others. Trade had begun slowly. A few brave merchant ships had started visiting Earth, always ready to flee at the first sign of trouble. Instead, they found humans eager to trade, curious about other cultures, and surprisingly generous in their dealings. Word had spread, and soon a small but steady stream of alien visitors came to Earth. But humanity had kept their military capabilities largely hidden. The visiting aliens saw human cities, human art, human music. They met human families and human children. They traded with human merchants and spoke with human scientists. What they didn't see were the orbital defense platforms, the military shipyards, or the fleets of warships that humanity had been building in the shadows of dead moons and empty asteroid belts. Because humans had learned an important lesson from their new alien friends. In a galaxy full of predators, Being strong wasn't enough. You had to make sure the predators never saw you coming. Now, 50 years later, humanity faced its first real test. Admiral Rebecca Torres stood in the war room beneath the Pentagon, staring at the holographic display showing the location of the distress signal. Around her, the greatest military minds on Earth debated their options. The politicians were nervous. The scientists were excited. The military commanders were grimly determined. "The signal is definitely genuine," reported Dr. Chen, who had been brought in as an expert consultant. "We've analyzed it from every angle. These Zilani people are really under attack. And they're really dying." How long would it take our ships to reach them?" asked General Park. Admiral Torres consulted her tablet. "Our fastest ships could make the journey in approximately 8 months, using our newest faster-than-light drives. But that's assuming we leave immediately." 8 months, muttered the Secretary of Defense. "By then, will there be anyone left to save?" "Unknown," Admiral Torres replied honestly. "But the signal is still broadcasting, which suggests they're still fighting." President Williams looked around the room. She was an older woman who had seen humanity through some of its darkest times, but never anything like this. "What are our options, Admiral?" "We have 3 choices, Madam President. 1. We ignore the signal and pretend we never received it. 2. We send a small diplomatic mission to assess the situation. Or 3. We send everything we have." "Everything?" Admiral Torres nodded grimly. "The full might of the human defense fleet. Every ship we've built in the last 50 years. Every weapon we've developed. Every soldier we've trained. We show the galaxy exactly what humans are capable of when innocent people are in danger." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. For 50 years, humanity had been content to stay in the shadows, building their strength and learning about the galaxy. If they revealed their true military power now, there would be no going back. Every species in the galaxy would know that the monsters from the Deathworld were real. But children were dying on worlds they had never seen. And humanity had made a promise. President Williams took a deep breath. "How long do you need to prepare the fleet?" 72 hours for the first wave, 1 week for the full deployment. Then do it. Send everything. Within an hour, coded messages were flashing to military bases around Earth and throughout the solar system. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, the shipyards of New Olympia roared to life. In the asteroid belt, mining ships were hastily converted to supply vessels. On the dark side of Luna, weapons that had never been tested outside of simulations were loaded onto ships that had been designed for a war everyone hoped would never come. Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as his crew prepared for departure. The Retribution was one of humanity's newest dreadnoughts, a ship so powerful that its test firings had to be conducted in empty sectors of space to avoid accidentally destroying something important. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Park from the communications station, "we're receiving final authorization codes from Fleet Command." Sullivan nodded. Around him, his bridge crew worked with the calm efficiency that came from years of training. They were all volunteers. Every single one of them. When the call had gone out for crews to join the rescue mission, more than 10 million humans had applied. The selection process had been brutal, choosing only the best of the best. "Helm, are we ready for departure?" "All systems green, sir. FTL drive charged and ready." Sullivan looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the rest of the fleet. 200 ships had been assembled for the first wave: destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels. It was the largest military force humanity had ever deployed, and it was only the beginning. "All ships. This is Admiral Torres aboard the UES Defiance. You know why we're here. Somewhere in the darkness, innocent people are dying while monsters burn their worlds. We're going to remind the galaxy why predators fear the dark. All ships, engage FTL drives on my mark." Commander Sullivan felt a familiar tightness in his chest. He had been a career military officer for 20 years, but he had never faced anything like this. None of them had. They were about to announce to the entire galaxy that the humans were coming, and they were bringing hell with them. "Mark." The first wave of the human defense fleet disappeared from Earth's solar system in a flash of twisted space-time, racing toward a distant star system where children were crying in the darkness. Behind them, construction crews worked around the clock to prepare the second wave, then the third, then the fourth. For 50 years, the galaxy had wondered what would happen if the Deathworlders ever went to war. They were about to find out. The distress signal continued to broadcast across the void, growing weaker with each passing hour. But now it carried something new. The faint echoes of faster-than-light engines pushing through hyperspace at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. The humans were coming. On 1,000 worlds, those with the technology to monitor hyperspace communications detected the fleet's passage. Old treaties were hastily reviewed. Ancient warnings were remembered. Emergency councils convened in the middle of local nights. The monsters from Sol were on the move, and nobody knew what that would mean for the galaxy. But in the Kepler 442 system, where Zilani mothers held their children close while enemy ships darkened their skies, there was about to be hope. The humans were coming, and they had not forgotten their promise. 8 months to save a dying civilization. 8 months to prove that even in a galaxy full of predators, there were still those willing to stand between the innocent and the dark. The greatest rescue mission in human history had begun. The Horde ship Devourer hung in orbit above Zilana Prime like a metal vulture, its weapons systematically turning another city to ash. Commander Vexhai watched the destruction through his ship's sensors, with the cold satisfaction of a predator finally cornering its prey. The Zilani had put up more resistance than expected. For a species of peaceful traders and artists, they had fought surprisingly hard for their worlds. But it didn't matter. The Horde had been consuming civilizations for 10,000 years. They knew how this story ended. "Commander," called one of his subordinates from across the bridge, "long-range sensors are detecting some kind of disturbance in hyperspace. Multiple contacts, approaching fast." Vexhai didn't even turn around. "More Zilani ships fleeing the system, no doubt. Let them run. We'll hunt them down later." "Sir, these readings don't match Zilani technology. The energy signatures are unusual." That got Vexhai's attention. He turned from the viewing port and stalked over to the sensor station. The young Horde technician was staring at readings that made no sense. "Show me," Vexhai growled. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the approach vectors of multiple contacts. Vexhai's eyes widened. There were dozens of them, moving in perfect formation at speeds that should have been impossible. Worse, their hyperspace signatures were completely unknown. "Have we seen this technology before?" he asked. "Never, sir. And sir, there's something else. The energy output from these ships is enormous. Some of them are reading as large as our dreadnoughts." Vexhai felt a chill run down his spine. In 10,000 years of conquest, the Horde had faced every type of enemy the galaxy could produce. They had crushed species with technology far advanced beyond the Zilani. They had defeated alliances of dozens of worlds. They had never encountered anything that gave them pause. "Time to emergence?" "Approximately 30 minutes, sir." Vexhai turned to his communications officer. "Signal the fleet. Battle stations. Unknown contacts approaching." Across the Kepler 442 system, 73 Horde warships received the alert. They were a mixture of destroyers, cruisers, and the massive dreadnoughts that had broken the defenses of 100 worlds. Their crews were veterans of countless battles. Beings who had never known defeat. They were about to learn what defeat felt like. 29 minutes later, space tore open at the edge of the system. The first wave of the human defense fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a formation so perfect that it looked like a single organism emerging from the void. Commander Sullivan stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as the tactical display populated with enemy contacts. 73 ships. It was a smaller force than they had expected, but intelligence suggested these were just the ships assigned to finish off the Zilani. The main Horde fleet was probably already moving on to their next target. "Tactical assessment?" Sullivan asked. Lieutenant Commander Martinez studied her screens. "Enemy fleet consists of approximately 20 light destroyers, 30 heavy cruisers, 15 battleships, and 8 dreadnoughts. Their technology appears to be standard galactic tech, plasma weapons, kinetic shields, conventional drives. And our assessment of their capabilities? Martinez allowed herself a small smile. Sir, based on what we're seeing, our destroyers could probably take their battleships one-on-one. Sullivan nodded. It was what they had expected. Humanity's 50 years of secret military development had been guided by one simple principle. If you're going to fight in a galaxy full of predators, make sure you're the apex predator. Communications? Any response to our hails? Nothing yet, sir. We're broadcasting the standard first contact protocols on all frequencies. Zelani response. We're picking up scattered transmissions from the planet's surface. They seem confused. One message we translated said, "Unknown ships. Please identify. Are you here to help us?" Sullivan felt the weight of the moment. In the next few minutes, humanity would either save an entire civilization or become just another failed species that had tried to stand against the darkness. All ships. This is Commander Sullivan aboard the UES Retribution. You know your orders. We're here to save lives and remind the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed. Weapons free. Show them what humans do to bullies. The response from the Horde was swift and predictable. The moment the human fleet moved toward the inner system, every Horde ship opened fire. Plasma bolts and kinetic slugs filled the space between the fleets. The Horde weapons were powerful enough to crack planets, fired by beings who had perfected the art of destruction across millennia of conquest. Every shot missed. Human ships moved through the barrage like dancers avoiding raindrops. Their engines produced acceleration curves that violated everything the galaxy thought it knew about physics. Their hulls turned and twisted in ways that should have torn them apart. And their pilots flew with a precision that made veteran Horde commanders question their own eyes. What in the name of the void are they doing? Vexhai snarled as he watched the human ships weave between his fleet's weapons, fire without taking a single hit. Sir, their movement patterns don't match any known species. They're pulling acceleration that should liquefy any organic crew, but their ships show no signs of distress. Vexhai didn't understand what he was seeing. He didn't know that human ships were designed around the simple fact that humans could survive accelerations that would kill most other species. He didn't know that human pilots trained in conditions that other species would consider torture. He didn't know that human reflexes had been forged by millions of years of evolution on a world where everything was trying to kill them. He was about to learn. The human fleet closed the distance with impossible speed. When they entered weapon range, space lit up with energies that had never been seen in galactic warfare. The UES Retribution fired its main batteries for the first time in actual combat. Particle beams that drew power directly from contained fusion reactions struck the nearest Horde dreadnought. The alien ship's shields, designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known to galactic science, lasted approximately 0.3 seconds. The dreadnought simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive ship bristling with weapons. The next moment, there was only expanding plasma and debris. Across the battle zone, similar scenes played out as the human fleet opened fire. Weapons designed in secret laboratories beneath Earth's surface unleashed forces that the galaxy had never imagined. Missiles that thought for themselves hunted down enemy ships with terrifying intelligence. Energy weapons that channeled the fury of stars reached across impossible distances to touch their targets. But it wasn't just the weapons that shocked the Horde. It was the way the humans fought. Every species the Horde had encountered fought in predictable ways. They formed lines and traded fire. They protected their important ships and sacrificed their weak ones. They followed ancient tactical doctrines that had evolved over thousands of years of galactic warfare. The humans threw all of that out the window. Human destroyers didn't stay in the back where they belonged. They charged straight into formations of heavy cruisers. Their smaller size and impossible speed allowing them to dance between enemy ships while their weapons carved them apart. Human cruisers didn't protect their flanks. They split up and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing the Horde fleet to divide its fire and attention. Human carriers didn't stay safely in the rear. They moved to the front lines, launching fighters that moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. And those fighters, Lieutenant Sarah Kim pulled her fighter into a turn that would have been suicide for any other pilot. The G-forces would have killed most species. But humans had been surviving impossible forces their entire evolutionary history. Her fighter screamed around a Horde destroyer, its weapons stitching a line of fire across the enemy ship's hull. "Phoenix 3. You've got 2 on your tail," came the voice of her wingman over the comm. "Copy that, Phoenix 4. Watch this." Kim killed her forward thrusters and fired her retro rockets, bringing her fighter to an almost complete stop in space. The 2 Horde fighters that had been chasing her shot past at full speed, suddenly finding themselves in front of their target instead of behind it. Kim's weapons ended the chase in less than 2 seconds. Across the battle zone, human fighter pilots were performing maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat. They flew into debris fields that should have destroyed them. They used gravity wells to slingshot around planets at speeds that should have been impossible. They turned their fighters into weapons, ramming enemy ships when their ammunition ran low. The Horde had been masters of space warfare for 10,000 years. They were being taught new lessons by a species that had been in space for barely a century. Commander Vexhai watched his fleet dissolve around him with growing horror. In 20 minutes of combat, the humans had destroyed more than half his ships without losing a single vessel of their own. "Sir, we need to retreat," his tactical officer called out. "Our weapons can't penetrate their defenses, and their ships move like nothing we've ever seen." Vexhai stared at the tactical display. His proud fleet, which had broken the defenses of hundreds of worlds, was being systematically destroyed by ships that should have been primitive compared to Horde technology. But these weren't primitive ships. They were nightmares made of metal and energy, crewed by beings who fought like demons. "Signal all ships," he said quietly. "Full retreat. Maximum speed." The surviving Horde vessels turned and fled toward the edge of the system, their crews in full panic. Behind them, the human ships didn't pursue. They had accomplished their mission. The immediate threat to the Zilani was eliminated. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Commander Sullivan surveyed the aftermath of humanity's first major space battle. The tactical display showed wreckage scattered across the system, the remains of one of the galaxy's most feared fleets. "Casualty report?" he asked. "Minor damage to 3 destroyers. No casualties. The UES Vigilant reports some scorch marks on their hull plating." Sullivan almost smiled. "Communications. Signal the planet. Tell them the immediate threat is over. We're here to help." 8. The response from the planet's surface came immediately, translated by the ship's computers. "Who are you? How did you do that?" "The Horde fleet. They were unstoppable. Tell them we're humans, from Earth, and tell them that nobody hurts innocent people while we're around." On Zilana Prime, in the ruins of cities that had been burning just hours before, people looked up at the sky in wonder. The monsters that had been killing their children were gone, driven away by ships from beyond the stars. But across the galaxy, emergency sessions were being called on 1,000 worlds. The humans had revealed themselves, and they were nothing like the galaxy had expected. They weren't just dangerous, they were impossibly, terrifyingly effective. In the deep reaches of space, the main Horde fleet received reports of what had happened at Kepler 442. Fleet Commander Carthul read the tactical analysis 3 times before he believed it. 73 ships destroyed. 0 human casualties. Victory achieved in 26 minutes. For the first time in his long life, the commander of the galaxy's most feared military force felt afraid. The humans weren't just another species to be conquered. They were something new. Something that changed everything. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the apex predators of a Deathworld decided to go to war. The news traveled across the galaxy faster than the fastest ships. On Vorthak Prime, the Galactic Trade Council held an emergency session that lasted 18 hours. Representatives from 200 species debated what humanity's emergence meant for the delicate balance of power that had kept the galaxy from total war. In the Andorian Empire, generals studied tactical recordings of the battle until their eyes burned, trying to understand how 73 warships had been destroyed without the attackers losing a single vessel. Deep in consortium space, intelligence agencies worked around the clock to gather every piece of information about Earth and its mysterious inhabitants. And in the dark reaches beyond charted space, the Horde leadership convened for the first time in 50 years to discuss a single, terrifying question. What did you do when you encountered a species that was better at war than you were? But on Zilana Prime, none of that mattered. Ambassador Keloni stood in the ruins of what had been her species' greatest city just 3 days ago, watching human engineers work alongside Zilani survivors to rebuild what the Horde had destroyed. The humans moved with the same terrifying efficiency they had shown in battle, but now that efficiency was focused on healing instead of destruction. "Ambassador," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Commander Sullivan approaching, his expression gentle, despite the fact that he had just orchestrated the destruction of an entire enemy fleet. "Commander," she replied, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "My people. We don't know how to thank you." Sullivan smiled. "You don't need to thank us. This is what we do." "But why?" Kelani asked. "You traveled across the galaxy to save people you had never met. Your ships, your weapons, you could conquer anyone you wanted. Why do you choose to protect instead?" It was a question Sullivan had been asked many times since they arrived. The answer was always the same: because that's who we are. We've seen what happens when good people do nothing. We've learned that the strongest don't always have to be the cruelest. Kelani nodded slowly. The humans were unlike any species her people had encountered. They were clearly the most dangerous beings in known space, but they used that danger to shield the innocent rather than exploit the weak. "What happens now?" she asked. Sullivan looked out at the reconstruction work. Human medical ships were treating Zilani wounded with technology that seemed like magic. Human engineers were sharing construction techniques that would make Zilani cities stronger than ever. Human scientists were working with Zilani researchers to develop new agricultural methods to replace the farms the Horde had burned. "Now we make sure this never happens again," he said, to anyone. 2 weeks after the battle, the second wave of human ships arrived in the Kepler 442 system. These weren't warships, but something the galaxy had rarely seen: vessels designed purely for humanitarian aid. The UES Mercy was a hospital ship larger than most space stations. Its medical bays could treat thousands of patients simultaneously, and its research labs were already working to develop treatments for injuries caused by Horde weapons. The UES New Hope was a massive construction ship that could rebuild an entire city in weeks. Its manufacturing facilities could produce everything from basic shelter to advanced technology, all designed to help species recover from Horde attacks. The UES Sanctuary was something entirely new, a ship designed to evacuate entire populations if necessary. Its vast holds could carry millions of refugees to safety, while its defensive systems ensured they would never be helpless again. Admiral Torres arrived with the second wave, establishing a temporary command base on Zilana Prime's largest moon. From there, she coordinated what would become known as the Restoration Project, humanity's effort to undo decades of Horde damage across multiple star systems. But the humans weren't content to simply repair what had been broken. They were building something new. 3 months after the battle, the first Human Protection Treaty was signed. The Zilani formally requested Earth's protection, offering trade agreements and technological cooperation in exchange for humanity's promise to defend them from future attacks. Within 6 months, 17 other species had signed similar treaties. The galaxy was changing. On Earth, President Williams stood before the United Nations Assembly, addressing not just human delegates but representatives from dozens of alien species who had traveled to the birth world of the galaxy's newest superpower. "We stand at a crossroads," she said, her words being broadcast across the galaxy in real time. "For too long, the strong have preyed upon the weak. For too long, innocents have suffered while others looked away. Today, we offer a different path." The Human Protection Pact was unlike any alliance the galaxy had ever seen. Rather than member species providing military support to each other, they would be protected by human forces in exchange for peaceful cooperation and mutual aid. Species that joined the pact agreed to resolve conflicts through negotiation rather than warfare, to share knowledge freely, and to assist in humanitarian efforts across the galaxy. The pact's motto was simple: "The strong protect the weak." Not everyone was pleased with humanity's emergence. Fleet Commander Carthul of the Horde stood before the War Council, the most powerful military leaders of his species, and delivered news that no one wanted to hear. "Our raids on 17 systems have been interrupted by human forces in the last 2 months," he reported. In every case, we have been forced to retreat with heavy casualties. The humans appear to have divided their fleet into rapid response groups that can reach any system in their sphere of influence within days. War Chief Sector slammed his fist on the council table. They're just one species from one world. How can they challenge the might of the Horde? Because they fight like nothing we've ever seen, Carthul replied. Their ships are faster, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics completely unpredictable. Worse, they're gaining allies. 23 species have joined their protection pact. If this continues, half the galaxy will be under human protection within a year. Then we strike at the source. War Chief Vashka said coldly. We take our entire fleet and burn their homeworld to ash. Without Earth, their protection pact crumbles. Carthul shook his head. Our intelligence suggests that would be suicide. Earth's defenses are extensive. Our best estimates indicate they have more firepower protecting their homeworld than we have in our entire fleet. The War Council fell silent. For 10,000 years, the Horde had been the galaxy's dominant military force. They had never encountered a species they couldn't eventually conquer or drive to extinction. The humans had changed that in less than a year. What do you recommend? Asked the war chief. We avoid human-protected space. We raid systems beyond their sphere of influence. We wait and watch. Eventually, they'll make a mistake. But the humans weren't making mistakes. If anything, they were getting stronger. Admiral Torres stood in the command center of Fortress Alpha, humanity's first permanent military installation outside the solar system. Built in the Zelani system, it served as headquarters for human protection efforts across the galaxy. The holographic display showed the current status of the Human Protection Pact. 43 species had joined, representing nearly 200 star systems. Human fleets patrolled the space lanes, ensuring that trade moved safely and that predator species thought twice before attacking the innocent. Admiral, called Captain Morrison from the communications station. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Consortium Council. They're requesting a formal meeting. Torres nodded. The Consortium was one of the galaxy's major powers, a federation of advanced species that had remained neutral in most conflicts. If they wanted to meet, it meant humanity's activities had gotten their attention. Schedule the meeting, she said. It's time we talk to our neighbors. The meeting took place in neutral space aboard a Consortium diplomatic vessel. Torres arrived with a small escort, while the Consortium sent their most senior diplomats and military advisors. Consortium Prime Minister Veltarn was an elderly being from a species that had been exploring space for thousands of years before humans had discovered fire. Her first words set the tone for everything that followed. Admiral Torres, your species has fundamentally changed the galaxy in less than 1 year. The question before us is simple. What do you want? Torres had expected this question. We want what we've always wanted. Peace for those who seek it. Protection for those who need it. And consequences for those who would harm the innocent. Your methods are unprecedented. Most species build alliances through mutual defense agreements. You offer protection in exchange for cooperation. Most species use military power to expand their territory. You use it to defend others. We find this unusual. We find it necessary, Torres replied. The galaxy has been at the mercy of predators for too long. Someone needed to change that. The Consortium Admiral, a being whose species had never lost a war, leaned forward. Your ships defeated 73 Horde vessels without taking casualties. Our analysts say this should have been impossible. Torres smiled. Our analysts say the same thing about your jump gate technology, but you make it work anyway. Are you threatening us, Admiral? I'm explaining that every species has advantages. Ours happen to be useful for keeping bullies in line. The negotiations continued for 3 days. In the end, the Consortium agreed to recognize the Human Protection Pact and establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. They didn't join the pact. Their own military was strong enough to defend their territory, but they agreed not to interfere with human protection efforts. More importantly, they agreed to share intelligence about Horde movements and other threats to galactic peace. 1 year after the distress signal from Zelana Prime had reached Earth, Admiral Torres stood in the same war room beneath the Pentagon, where the decision to intervene had been made. The holographic display now showed a galaxy transformed. The Human Protection Pact covered nearly a quarter of known space. Trade was flowing freely between member systems. Scientific cooperation was advancing technology at an unprecedented rate, and for the first time in recorded history, large-scale military conflicts were becoming rare. The Horde still existed, but they were confined to the outer rim of the galaxy, raiding systems too distant for human protection. Other predator species had either been driven out of human space or had reformed themselves into legitimate governments. President Williams, now serving her second term, entered the war room with a smile on her face. "Admiral, I have news from the Galactic Trade Council. They're formally recognizing Earth as a major galactic power. We've been invited to join the Galactic Security Council." Torres nodded. It was the recognition that humanity had always deserved, but had never sought. They hadn't conquered their way to the top of galactic civilization. They had protected their way there. "There's something else," the president continued. "We've received another distress signal. This one from the Rigel system. A species called the Methari. They're under attack by something called the Ravager Fleet." Torres felt that familiar tightness in her chest. Another species in danger. Another call for help. Another chance to remind the galaxy that the strong had a duty to protect the weak. How long to reach them? 6 months at maximum speed. Torres turned to the president. "Ma'am, requesting permission to deploy the Third Fleet." President Williams smiled. "Permission granted, Admiral. Show them what humans do." As Torres left to prepare for another rescue mission, she thought about how much had changed since that first distress signal had reached Earth. Humanity had gone from hiding in the shadows to standing as guardians of galactic peace. They had proven that strength didn't have to mean cruelty, that power could be used to uplift rather than oppress. But perhaps most importantly, they had kept their promise. Across the galaxy, on worlds where children played safely because human ships patrolled their skies, that promise was remembered. "We will protect those who cannot protect themselves." The distress signal from the Rigel system continued to broadcast across the void, growing weaker with each passing hour. But soon it would carry new hope, the sound of human ships racing through hyperspace, carrying the fury of Earth's children to yet another battlefield. The galaxy had learned to fear the predators. Now it was learning to love the protectors. The humans were coming, and they brought with them the most powerful force in the universe. The promise that good people would never have to face the darkness alone. In the depths of space, monsters still prowled the void, looking for easy prey. But now they had to worry about something they had never faced before. Humans who had heard someone calling for help. The age of predators was ending. The age of protectors had begun.